I'm continuing my series on the games of Bobby Fischer and researching this theme, researching through his games. I can see that he remained loyal to certain systems throughout his career, right from childhood on. And one of those is the King's Indian defence with black, and with white, the King's Indian attack, obviously very closely related. So Fischer used to play this, the King's Indian attack, against the French, but he could also play it against the Sicilian, e4, c5, knight a3, e6, and then he used to play d3 and often reach exactly this setup. This is, I mean, this isn't really an opening variation, it's a system with white, a system which Fischer clearly felt very comfortable with. So I'm looking at a game he played in the Sousse Interzonal tournament in 1967, and he was playing against the Mongolian player, an international master, Myagmarsuren. And this is the absolute main line of the King's Indian attack. I think the great thing about playing this with white is that you don't really need to know variations in detail. You need to understand the setup. You need to understand the plans, but you can't refute this system. This, you could say, is the main line of the opening. So white plays the pawn to e5 and will use that as a kind of spearhead for the attack, because this knight on f6 has been driven away. So black's king is just a little bit exposed with the pawn on e5. Quite typically, it makes life slightly difficult for black and makes it less easy for black to transfer defenders to the king's side. But as a kind of compensation, black controls a nice part of the centre and is able to launch a queenside attack. So the knight shifts around to f1, that frees the bishop, and this knight might well join the fray. So we're still very much in known territory here. So the bishop overprotects the pawn. That means this knight on f3 can now move. a4, and up till this point everything had been seen before, and you could say one of the main lines would be something like knight here, and then black would play a3 and b3, and very often later on that knight would try to spin round to the c3 square, and of course that's a little bit uncomfortable. And also black would try and get in the c4 break, but this is still an extremely double-edged position, but probably black has sufficient counterplay. But here Fischer played a new move, a3, and since this game this has really become the main line of this opening. Very simple idea. You stop black playing a3, which is for white positionally undesirable, and it rather holds up black's queenside counterplay. So just from a positional point of view, Fischer had thought very deeply and comes up with an excellent move. As I said, this is really taken over as the main line following this game. Black exchanged, and now to my mind played a very odd move. The most popular move here is to play bishop a6, which looks logical, and maybe try and go for c4. And I mean, it's still impossible to say what the best ideas are here for both sides. It's a very double-edged position. For example, the bishop a6 was played in the game between Svidler and Karyakin a couple of years ago, but it's still a very hot and very current position. In any case, Myagmarsuren played knight a5. Presumably, he's looking to get in c4, but the knight just looks very odd on a5 to my eyes. Or maybe he's thinking if the c-pawn moves, then this knight can come into b3. But anyway, it looks like a strange move to me. And here white could play h5, knight h2, but Fischer played quite a provocative move, knight e3. he might be looking to play c4, which yeah, can be an interesting move to break up black's pawns. He could be switching the knight to g4, but actually, above all, he's looking to tempt black into playing this move d4, and this is what happened. So bishop a6 was played. Now bishop h3, another very interesting move from Fischer. You know, you could play more directly with h5, for example, but bishop h3 starts to set up some interesting tactics. You know, if this queen moves away from the knight, then knight takes is possible. Sometimes knight takes is possible, and followed by pushing with e6. So it's a tricky move. Sometimes there can be sacrifices on e6 as well. Anyway, black felt provoked, or he wanted to play d4, and well, how many of us would just throw the knight into g4? But no, Fischer came back to f1. Very, very interesting. You know, he plays, you know, he has very much his own ideas, and well, by all accounts, Fischer used to play very, very quickly as well. So he's provoked this move d4, which means he's able to use the e4 square for his pieces, and this, as we'll see, is very, very useful. Now, one of the reasons he played back to f1 instead of g4 is that after knight g5, this clears the path for the queen to come to the king's side, and now we can see white's attack starting to really build in earnest. Knight came to d5. Okay, well, black is using his central control as well. Now the bishop dropped back to d2, and you can see, well, yeah, keeping an eye on that knight, and I think it's quite clear that this plan with knight a5 was really mistaken. Yeah, it's clear the knight can't stay there for very long. Okay, now white is starting to threaten things like queen h5, and knight takes e6 or knight f7 start to look extremely dangerous. So black remove the knight. Could play pawn takes here, but Fischer keeps things clearer with bishop takes, because he can see that actually he'll be able to attack straight away with that bishop. And now this knight, which I tell you what, this is the hardest working knight. It's spinning round again. I mean, it's done quite a tour already, and about to come into e4. Knight c3, and now bishop f6, and now, well, unsurprisingly, I think black is already completely lost here. You know, if all the pieces move away from the king's side, then something is going to happen. So bishop f6. Now, if that's taken, this isn't too difficult. The king in desperate trouble. Obviously, mate threatened. If king h8, well, there are various ways to win, but this is the most appealing. Bishop f5, threatening mate. And if pawn takes, then the rook comes in, and the only way to stave off mate on h7 is to give up the queen. Now, black might have a rook and two minor pieces for the queen, but the king is completely exposed, and white can use all three of his pieces in the attack. So, I mean, this is just completely lost. Very easy for white to win that game, win that position. So, in this position, queen g5 followed by a standard mate is threatened. So black has to play queen e8 in order to meet queen g5 with queen f8. But another piece joins the attack. g6 played. If queen h6, then queen f8. So queen g5. And this knight has to be exchanged off. I mean, this, for example, is a simple threat. So knight takes, rook takes, and now the rook can come into play. As said, I think black is completely lost here. But he's trying to make the best of it by playing the sharpest move. So he's trying to open the position up on the queen side. h5. And what's great about this is that Fischer completely ignores this counterattack, because he will have calculated out this finish many moves ago. Well, if pawn takes pawn at the other end of the board, then white is breaking through very, very easily. If that's taken, then queen h4 check. Let's just play that through. And mate on g7. And if black gets a queen, well, this can be taken actually, and then white checkmates from the other side. That will lead to mate very quickly. So back to this position. Black had the idea to defend along the... So white has just played the rook to h4, and black had the idea to defend along the 7th rank with rook a7. So if the pawns are exchanged, then after f pawn takes, then you can see the rook defends along here. Let's just go back to... So rook a7 just played. And here, well, if you'd like to pause the video and try and find the forced mate, I'm sure there's more than one way to win this position, but Fischer, I'm sure, had seen this well in advance. He played bishop g2. It's really beautiful. Now, if bishop b7, that blocks the 7th rank, so white can return to this sacrifice. But black ploughed on. I'm sure by this stage he'd seen the finish as well. Queen h6, threatening mate on g7. And now, final move of the game, queen takes pawn check, and that leads to a forced mate. Here black resigned. It's a pity. Would have been nice to see the mate on the board after this. And now we see the point of bishop g2. He can play bishop e4 and mate. There you go. I find it very interesting that intuitively Fischer appreciated that this e4 square was crucial to his attack, and that he could use this very well. Well, the knight passed through e4, the rook passed through e4, and finally the bishop came to e4, delivering checkmate. I've got a question for you. Let's come back to this point, and this is where black played rook a7. And if you remember, after bishop g2, then it wasn't possible to counter with bishop b7 because that blocked the 7th rank. So here's my question. Instead of rook a7, what would happen if black played rook c7, defending along the 7th rank? And that means that if white plays bishop g2, then you can block out with bishop b7. So I'll throw it over to you. How would white win from this position? I'll tell you in the next video.